Hey everybody, welcome to Workforce Gaming. I am Brad, here with Doug.
Hey.
Doug just finished up Blasphemous, which is one of those games that I feel like I always look at every time I see it on sale, because it looks like Castlevania.
It is a Castlevania-ass Castlevania game, which is funny because I feel like when I'm going to talk about this game, like I'll talk about the gameplay aspects like really briefly because it is just a Castlevania game, but sort of thing.
Yeah, oh yeah. Which, I mean, if you're going to go for something, go for the greats, so that makes sense. So you play this on Switch, how is it different from Castlevania? Because if it is just Castlevania, like, can we just say it's Castlevania, okay, moving on, story?
Yeah. To be totally honest, like, yeah, actually, I was thinking about that because I was trying to think, it's like, okay, mechanically, what is unique about this game? And it's like, everything you've seen here is like, and the thing that's kind of disappointing with like the game, it is a Castlevania-esque Castlevania game, which means it's a 2D game. You sort of explore, like, let's say a quote unquote open world of sorts. I don't know how else you describe a Castlevania game. You're told very briefly at the beginning, you go north, you go up, you go east, or you go south. Yeah. And then you just kind of like follow one of those directions. Then you eventually come back and then go north and you go south. Very similar to Castlevania, similar to Dark Souls stuff.
Does it have all of the Metroidvania, like, oh, you unlocked extra jump, you unlocked blank to get past stuff, and then all the Metroidvania stuff in there?
Yeah, and like, it's like, oh, you picked up something that helps you against fire. Boy, that'll be really nice against that fire boss.
Yeah.
There is some mechanically, like there's some stuff that you can do that like will help you get better jumps and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. But I think it's really crazy. And I think it's kind of a mistake on their part is like things like that, like okay, there's like a ledge that's too high.
Yeah.
In order to get that ability, to get like that, I beat the game originally without ever getting any sort of traversal abilities. Because to get those traversal abilities, like just like something say as simple as like a double jump. It's not a double jump, but it works essentially the same way. Yeah. I had to like go and look up a guide, and it's like a 4 or 5 step process. Like after I'd beaten the game, I was like, I feel like I should have gotten some abilities. Like went back and there's like 4 or 5 step process of putting items in the right spot, which is very Dark Soulsy. Mm-hmm. Of like you need to do this kind of like weird obscure things to get to this thing. Okay. So it feels like honestly like the Metroidvania part is like a little disappointing because like Hollow Knight does it so well, and there's like a lot of other games that just do that type of gameplay really, really well.
Yep.
And this one does it pretty good, but it's not as good as those games mechanically. But it probably has like one of my favorite worlds of any game games I've played, like definitely up there with Bloodborne and stuff.
Oh, really?
Like the world of it. So I mean that's like all I'll say about like the Metroidvania stuff. It plays like a standard Metroidvania game. It plays like a not so great one of those, especially compared against the greats.
Where is the difficulty? Because you mentioned Castlevania and Hollow Knight, which are both fairly difficult in general. But how does the difficulty compare to those?
About that, okay. I mean, I would say it's not Dark Souls hard or anything like that, and it's got like a weird difficulty curve where it's way easier by the end because you just have so much health and stuff than it is at the beginning. Mm-hmm. I would say like the beginning, it's definitely not Dark Souls hard, but it's almost like initial bosses like really tough, and there's definitely like 1 or 2 that was definitely getting into Dark Soulsy territory of like this is actually a really hard boss. Okay. But if you're just used to hard 2D platformers and that sort of stuff, it's a hard one, but it's not like something that's like totally impossible. I would say Hollow Knight was probably harder than this one for sure. Okay. But let's talk about the world because the world is like the coolest shit ever. Right. So this game is it comes from Spanish developers, and they had sort of pseudo recently, as like one of the major updates, was released a Spanish dub of this, which I highly recommend playing the Spanish version of instead of the English voice cast. It kind of comes across feeling it's like a very Guillermo del Toro sort of those like fantasy Spanish fantasy movies. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. I'd be really curious to read like some of the interviews from the developer on this stuff because it seems like a game about like guilt from like Christian guilt.
Okay.
So what the concept of the game is there is this big cataclysmic event called the Miracle. And what the miracle is, I forgot the exact context in which it starts, but basically somebody is. It's a lot of games about like people feeling guilty for their sins and that sort of thing. So this person basically prays to They never say Jesus or anything like that, which is kind of interesting. Like, it's not Christianity, but boy, do they use a lot of iconography from Christianity.
We're going to get in trouble if we say that. So just, the guy.
Yeah, so somebody who is very sorry for their sins prays to something, we don't know, which causes this cataclysmic event called the miracle. And what the miracle is, it basically makes sin real. And think of, if you come from any sort of Christian background, sort of like, let's say like that sort of evangelical, like sin is like a burden on you, or sin like can eat you up from the inside, but it does that literally.
So like personifies it.
Yeah, it personifies it. So like these people who it's hard to get like very specific because it's not super specific, like, oh, this person is guilty about cheating on somebody, so there's a very I don't know, very specific thing. But basically what's happened is like it creates like all these people have like these horrible diseases, they are deformed in all these like really weird and interesting ways, and the reason it's called Blasphemous is essentially you're a character that's, it's not really clear exactly what you're doing. This is again very Dark Souls sort of stuff, but you're basically going against the miracle. So it's basically this like entire society that's sort of like this what do you call that, what do you call like the people who like beat themselves, like self flagellation or
something like that. Yeah,
but it's like, imagine entire society like built on that, so they see this sort of like suffering as like as a blessing sort of thing. Like, so these monsters, like these horrible deformities, are to teach us some sort of lesson sort of thing, and we should like, so it's this really weird sadomasochistic Christian fantasy world that's like really horrifying. And then the whole fact that you're like fighting against it, it's like you're essentially like desecrating whatever this thing is. So basically it's set this whole fake religion that's vaguely Christian, vaguely this idea of like original sin and that sort of thing, and then you commit like acts of blasphemy against it, which is kind of fun. And it uses a lot of iconography from Christian. You kill a lot of cardinals, few acolytes. It really reminds me of kind of like Bayonetta's aesthetic, like, oh, you're killing angels.
Yeah.
But I'd say it's a lot more on the nose, like if somebody who like clearly grew up in that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So like you see like a lot of suffering saints and that sort of thing. Like a lot of characters you'll meet, like you'll meet a character, like the character that gives you health is this character that just has like a bunch of swords stuck in them that are like forever bleeding kind of thing. There's like characters that are like locked in cages and like that they're like locked in cages and they're the ones who are giving you this stuff, and a lot of suffering going around. And essentially because you're this character who is going against this, like going against the miracle, it's like considered blasphemy, which is just really crazy and weird.
Yeah.
And like I would say the thing that kind of like pushed me through was like the boss fights and stuff, because they really go deep into, not that actually mechanically the boss fights were interesting, but they definitely go way more into that iconography stuff. Like you'll fight giant not Jesus babies, you'll fight giant not clearly this one very specific, like so for example, one is a boss fight against a cardinal who died, and then the people sort of like dressed him up again as a cardinal. Like you've heard about this stuff like in the 1800s happening sort of thing. They dressed him up, and then like people picked him up like he was still moving, so you're like have to hit the hands that are holding him up to like cool. Drop him down. So it's really, really cool, and it's just that sort of stuff, and it feels a little wrong, which is kind of fun.
that is always so. I'm just picturing this boss fight, so because this is interesting to me, because all I'm picturing is like pretend dead guy like flying there while people are lifting up, and you're just like knocking him down. Like I'm very
So what is this? Like think of like a dead body kind of like lounging back,
and it's
that's
just
like all
people,
dressed in robes, and there's and these giant hands holding it up. And then you have to hit the hands to break off the hands, so then the thing like collapses, and then you can hit its head or something like that.
Yeah, okay, that's pretty awesome. So with this, you mentioned Dark Souls and like being a bit coy with the details, I guess, like not being. Is it like Dark Souls where like you never really get that good feeling of what's going on until you're like deep into like what's going on, or do you always have that sense of purpose?
Yeah, like,
you have like hints along the way, like how does the story play out? Because Dark Souls stories always make me not happy.
this isn't gonna make you happy. It's like it's really not clear. Like there's some characters who are like, I remember that there's like a character like really late in the story who like comes to you. It's like, I can't believe you've been desecrating our land and blah 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 blah. I was like, I don't know who you are. Like I have no idea who this character is. And I was like, but they seem really important to me, and they look kind of like my character, and I don't know why, sort of thing.
Okay.
And then the normal ending is like really really inconclusive. And it's like, all right, and that's just like, okay, now I got to go back and do the whatever the final ending sort of thing, the true ending.
Mm-hmm, yep.
And then the true ending, I should have just made that the default ending, because it's actually it's pretty cool of like what happens, because it has a lot to do with like holy relics and this sort of thing, and like I don't want to spoil it, but it does some like really cool stuff. But I just like that idea of this sort of whatever that like 1800 versions of Catholicism is, where there's just a lot of saints' bones and I forgot, what do you even call it? There's actually like a name for that, sort of like those like items kind of thing, like holy items.
My mind goes to relics, but I think there's some much more specific name.
Yeah, exactly. But that's that sort of stuff, and the game, and like a lot of the pickups are that sort of thing. But it plays a lot with that of like, this is what this holiness is. There's a really cool scene of what do you call like the prayer?
Rosary.
In Catholicism, you have the smoke. It's like the you do it for like certain blessings. It's like a little like lantern looking thing that you swing, and it has smoke coming out of it.
Not my area of expertise.
Okay, that's fine. But there's a really big one that's like swinging through, and you're like go through this whole level of these swinging sort of prayer ones, and it's really cool. I think it was really neat, and like I think it was definitely like a point of view, because it definitely seemed like there was somebody who's kind of pointing out these things like, hey, this is like wrong. Like this is essentially the ideal sort of, if you are into original sin and that kind of like, this is the ideal situation where everybody is just like complete suffering and beating themselves, hoping that they get some sort of salvation. And then the whole thing is like, yeah, maybe that's not a great idea.
maybe there's some flaws in this logic somewhere.
And I feel like it hits that tone really nice throughout the game. I do say sometimes like the execution animations are a little bit too it's a really, really violent game, but it's not. The executions can sometimes get like splatterhousey, like you're like kicking a guy and that sort of thing. It's it doesn't really fit the tone. I felt like some of the animation stuff didn't necessarily fit the tone of it sometimes, because I thought it was, well, I mean, Dark Souls also has jokes in it, but I do like it kind of taking itself pretty seriously throughout, because it really kind of nails that point home. But sometimes with like the animation and stuff, they're like just kind of goofy and splattery and stuff, which I didn't really enjoy. And that's the thing. It's like the gameplay wise, it's stuff. It's like kind of conclusively, it's like the gameplay is fine. It's, if you like Metroidvanias, you might like this one. But really it's just the setting that is really, really neat. I found aspects of it more interesting than Bloodborne and like the games I would consider like my top tier world building stuff. I think just because there was a better understanding of what they were using, more so than Bloodborne. When somebody's coming from that culture and then like criticizing it, it's a much harder criticism than somebody who's like kind of just borrowing pictures from
taking
it sort
ideas.
of thing.
Because you've in theory, again, I don't know the developers on this, lived it, you've seen it, you've been in a part of it. It's much easier to go, okay, here's what's coming from this, here's where this is coming from, here's how this all impacted me personally, how I feel it impacts the world. It's a much easier story to tell. Interesting. I always like when these get real deep into stories, these 2D games. I feel like so many are like, story screen at beginning, story screen at ending. Yeah, you did it. And
I'll definitely admit that there's like a lot of like, every item has like press X for lore, like every item, and it's like a paragraph, and there are like probably literally like 100 items or something like that. I'll admit I didn't go through every lore thing, because I was just because it's like written, it's like I don't know, like Saint Sebastian was called to the shores of the eternal whatever. It's like, oh man, I don't have time for those. But it's cool. But it's like there's like they're writing in that style of like describing holiness and that kind of thing. That's cool. So,
had you read him, you probably would have known who that dude was that popped up. That you were like, I don't know who you are. He was probably in an item somewhere.
Probably.
Anyway, we are Workforce Gaming. You can follow us on Twitter at Workforce Gaming. Subscribe to us wherever you're listening, and we will see you later.
Bye.